We're in a series on how to lead with significance. Great leadership, it's like building a house, and there are 5 C's that make up our leadership house. The first C is culture. Culture is defined as values in action. Culture is the foundation of our house. Everything else rests upon it. And the 2 ingredients that make up culture are vision plus accountability. The next C is character. Character is like our blueprint of the house. It shows us where to put everything else and how to effectively use the materials that we've been given. The ingredient of character is integrity. Today, we're going to talk about our third C, which is competency. Competency can be defined as knowledge plus skills. It's what you bring to the table. And in our house illustration, it's like our material. It's the 2x4s. It's the sheetrock. It's all these things that we bring to our companies and to the people that we work with. Now, the first ingredient to competency, it's self-awareness. The Greeks had a phrase, they said, know thyself. But here's the issue. We have a little bit of a self-awareness issue in our society today because you see, most of us think we're self-aware. However, when I speak on self-awareness, I ask people to raise their hand and say, hey, who thinks they're self-aware? Everybody hands goes up. I then ask them, do you know somebody who's not self-aware? Everybody hands goes up. It's interesting to me that we interact with people who we say are not self-aware all the time, and yet we think the ones that we're self-aware. You see, we are less self-aware than we give ourselves credit for. And that's scary because, see, self-awareness, it's the single greatest predictor to maturity. And that's my greatest fear in life, is to not know how I come across to other people. To have this thing that I'm doing that's hindering my leadership. So in order to be a self-aware leader, there are 3 things you have to know about yourself. Your strengths, your weaknesses, and your blind spots. Now, I've got some bad news. You have more weaknesses and less strengths than you realize. But I also have some good news. Those few strengths that you have, they are more powerful and significant than you give them credit for. So here's our exercise, okay? Here's our game plan to help develop self-awareness. The first thing we have to do, we have to refine our strengths. We have to, one, know what our strengths are, and there's lots of great tests that are out there. Strengths Finder by Gallup, the Marcus Buckingham Company has a test called Standout. There's lots of different ways that we can find that out. But when we know our strengths, then we spend the majority of our time focusing on them and refining them and perfecting them. I heard a quote that said, find what you do well and perfect it. The second thing we have to do is we compensate for our weaknesses. Your weaknesses, they will never be your strengths. So you shouldn't spend all your time trying to overcome them. Our goal is to get our weaknesses to par, to average, so they don't distract from our strengths. Now, I will say this as a caveat to that. You live in your strengths, but I would encourage you to teach from your weaknesses. Because when we share out of our weaknesses and our failures and our struggles, those are some of the most powerful lessons that we have. And then finally, we have to minimize our blind spots. A blind spot is really just a weakness that we don't know about. You don't know what you don't know, and what you don't know, it could kill you. This is what it comes back to accountability, right? I heard a story about Marion Jones. You might remember her. She was a highly decorated track athlete in the early and mid 2000s, won a lot of medals in the Olympics. However, most of them got stripped away from her. She got disqualified. She took performance-enhancing drugs and then lied before Congress and had to do jail time. In an interview, while she was still in prison about a month before she was going to get released, the interviewer asked her, what caused you to step over that line? What caused you to make that initial decision to start cheating? And she said this, I stopped hanging out with people who would tell me like it is, and I started hanging out with people who would just pat me on the back and say, everything you do is great. It's why we need accountability. It's why we need people to call us out on our blind spots and to reveal those to you. And if you want to take it to the next level, ask your spouse, ask your friends, ask your coworkers, ask your boss. Ask them what blind spots you have in your life that will stop you or hinder you from reaching your potential. Let me leave you with our treatable lesson. To develop leadership is less about learning new skills and more about unlearning habits and breaking free from limiting mindsets that we have already acquired.